Unfortunately, before we get into this weekend's episode, on behalf of the F1 podcast, we want to send our deepest condolences to Delano Bont Hoff, who was a racing driver who passed away, unfortunately, this weekend. He was racing for MP Motorsport for the 2023 season. He was racing in Spa and he passed away in a crash this weekend. So our thoughts are with his family. I know a number of the drivers did say some messages and they did a moment of silence on Sunday's race. On behalf of the team, I just want to send our deepest condolences to everybody involved. And
he was an up and coming young man, and it's unfortunate to see that he passed away doing the one thing that he loved the most. So again, our deepest condolences to his family and his friends, and we are with you throughout these challenging times.
What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here from the F1 podcast. Happy July 3rd, and we are filming this right after the Austrian Grand Prix. I'm here with my amazing colleagues, Andrew and Erica. How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic.
Doing well, thanks.
That's awesome. And just before we kind of get into things, I just wanted to let our listeners know happy Canada Day, and for our listeners down in the United States, happy 4th of July tomorrow. Amazing weekend in Austria this weekend. We saw a lot happen. But before we get into it, just want to talk about Instagram really quickly. In our last episode, we said we want to get to 500 by the end of July. We are sitting at 452. Andrew, when we recorded last week, I think we were not even 450. Now we're 452, baby.
Do a barrel roll.
Yeah, we'll keep going and going and going. And we have a little friendly competition with the Dirty Side of the Track podcast. See if we can get the first to 500 followers. So follow us. Follow them. They're a great podcast down south. To see, let's see if we can beat them. So support both and help the F1 community out as much as we can.
But follow us first, because we want to be to 500 first.
Yeah, this is I love the friendly banter that we have with some of our, friends / competitors, but friends first as well. Yeah. So, but make sure to hit that subscribe button on all of our social medias, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Onto the race recap. I've volunteered myself to do the fastest lap. Andrew, I finally will be able to do it this time. I promise. Let's see if I can get through everything in a minute and 7 seconds. So Max Verstappen did set the fastest lap on the last lap at 1 minute and 7 seconds.
Against his team's best wishes, but you never know. Hey.
Oh, I can't wait to get into it. Oh, I'm so excited. But let's try this out. Who's got the timer today?
I do. So it was 1 minute, 8 seconds, I believe you just said.
107.
All right, Ricci, are you ready? I'll count you down.
Absolutely not, but let's do it.
We do it live, folks. Ready? In 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to the 2023 Austrian Grand Prix, where track limits was the buzzword for the whole weekend. Let's start with Friday, which saw Max Verstappen and a number of drivers get track limits, and that resulted in Sergio Perez not able to make it into Q3 for the 4th time in a row of this season since Monaco. Nevertheless, Max Verstappen pulled off a massive last-minute push on medium tires to take pole position, with both the Ferraris looking impressive going 2-3. All eyes were on Lando Norris, where he pulled out a P5 in qualifying, but let's discuss a little bit more about Lando later. In the sprint, talk about a doozy of a sprint race. Wet conditions, Perez took the lead from Verstappen at the first corner and then edged the world champion onto the grass after the corner. Verstappen made a quick out of turn 4 and proceeded to motorway to yet another win. But, oh no, I'm definitely not going to get this. Perez led Ferrari's Carlos Sainz home in second place. Hulkenberg was impressed throughout the race, initially building a lead over Perez, but then a number of drivers halfway through the sprint changed to, nope. Done.
You lose.
I almost got there, but
Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, Ricci. Hate to break it to you.
Do a barrel roll.
Yeah, just very quickly, there was some fighting going on between both the Red Bulls in the sprint race, and we'll talk a little bit about that. A number of drivers did end up getting track limits on race day. Let's just be real, Max Verstappen wins again, but the story is Aston Martin protested at the end, and it changed a lot of the outcome in some of these positionings. Leclerc gets back onto the podium for the second time of the season. Hopefully this means good things to come, but let's get right into it.
The hills have eyes and track limits too, apparently. As you mentioned, theme of the weekend was deleted lap time sessions. Deleted lap times at every session this weekend, with 47 lap times deleted during qualifying, 7 during the race, at least 83 during the race, so for a total of 137 across the entire weekend. And there were 61 warnings during the race, 11 black and white flags, 8 penalties that saw a classification result of Max, Leclerc, Checo, Sainz, Norris, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Gasly, Stroll. The Aston Martin sporting director decided to take a J.K. Rowling size novel to the FIA and the stewards for a protest, which was upheld because apparently they had 1,200 laps that had to be reviewed due to potential breaching of track limits at some point in that lap, which I think is approximately 83% of the laps completed in that race overall. And then which brought on 12 additional time penalties, which we can review later because they're quite funny. But the race classification changed to Max, Charles, Checo, Lando, Alonso, Sainz, Russell, Hamilton, Stroll, Gasly. So that saw Ferrari go down in the points, Aston Martin catch some points. And yes, quite an event at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg.
That's a comical number of track limit violations, quite frankly. I don't care how you swing it. The best part of the whole thing was that we had kindergarten level snitching going on during the race where drivers were on the radio calling each other out, asking for reviews because they knew it just like penalties were going to keep rolling and they needed people to review it. But the fact that you hear people on the radio being like, oh, so-and-so just went over the limit. Oh, well, like if I'm getting a penalty, this guy should get a penalty too.
I literally felt like everybody was like, is it Randall from The Recess? Like, Miss Finster, Miss Finster. Perez went over the white lines. He needs to be off the podium. Leave it to Aston Martin. If they have a bad weekend, they're just going to probably run to the FIA. Someone did something wrong. Ain't that right, Andrew?
Damn straight they are. Well, when you have 1,200 laps that have to get reviewed and I hate to say it, only, Alonso and Russell, I think along with Joe weren't the ones that did any of the laps. I've looked at I did some research on the FIA classification documents this weekend, and it was, you see the same names over and over again. And it was all at the final turn 9, turn 10, which is like the downhill fast right-hand sweeper. I guess in a sense, I'm curious everyone's take on it. When I read the one document that was provided by the stewards after the race about how the track limit. So this was from the stewards at the publication of the provisional classification during the session of the race. So when they received the protest for Aston Martin, it went through Chapter 13 FAA International Sporting Code, which was an admissible protest, and they mentioned that an examination of the listed deleted tap lights provided by the stewards by race control revealed that a number of track limit infringements had not been previously referred to the stewards for potential penalty. It was determined that some of these infringements warranted a penalty that was not previously applied when the provisional classification was published, because there were so many laps that they had to review that they couldn't do it all during the race. They had to do it post-race in that regards. And I thought it was funny when they handed 12 penalties out at the end. And the stewards, as there's a line that says, the stewards very strongly recommend that a solution be to the track limit situation at this circuit. So I asked Canada's number F1 podcast, according to our mothers team, what do you think should be the solution at this circuit?
Fix it.
Do a barrel roll.
Ridiculous.
Like if you have arguably 20 of the best drivers in the world and all of them are going over the line for this track limit violation, it shows that the issue is not the cars, because there's so much variety in terms of the performance of the cars. And I'm willing to bet that if you're this good of a driver to make it to F1, the likelihood of it being driver error is also pretty slim. It's just the way the track is built puts the drivers in a situation wherein they have to go over these lines in order to not absolutely biff it going around some of these turns. And so to me, like Ricci said, fix it, widen the track, move things out a little bit so that this doesn't become an issue going forward.
Pardon my ignorance, and I'm going to try to say this in the nicest way possible. Like, we have 20 of the best drivers on the grid, as Erica says. Why is it on this track that this was such a problem compared to all the other tracks that we have on the grid? I mean, we have world champions here that proven themselves, and then all of a sudden, like, the little bit of a screw up, and it's like, well, bam, 30 seconds.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton, for crying out loud. The guy's got 7 world driving championships under his belt, and even he fell victim to what was going on this weekend. You kidding me?
Well, he was crying out loud a lot over the radio, too.
Well, we did have some solid gold moments on the radio this week. We know the car is bad, just drive it. But
Yeah, I agree with you, Erica and John. It's the track. They have to do something because they reached a contract for them to race there until 2030.
You lose.
So I think widening turn 9 and 10 would be the best solution. You can't put a wall there, but because it would be dangerous. What do you thought would be funny if at 9 and 10, if people are going off, they start firing water guns at the drivers?
It's not only just a water gun, but like you guys weren't in Montreal this year, but they had so when Red Bull won and we were able to walk the track, the engineers had like a horn that they just kept blowing off all the time because they were like celebrating that they win. So it's like if they go over this line, someone should be there with a horn and you just blare it.
I think it should be a Jack in the Box instead, where if you go over the line, this thing just pops up and it's like, oh, surprise, you went over the line.
You can make a drinking game out of it. Just thinking about it now.
It could be like the Santa hat game. You know, when you watch a Christmas movie and you've got the Santa hat on the TV, and anytime it looks like someone's wearing the Santa hat, you drink. It could be like anytime someone has a track limit violation.
From a viewing standpoint, it made qualifying unwatchable, having 47 times deleted. You never knew where anybody stood because they had to review it. And should all 4 tires go into the curbing there at 9 and 10, the time was deleted. And it wasn't an immediate too, right? It was about a 30-second to even a 5-minute delay on the decision. And then the track time just went away. And, imagine from a viewpoint, that must be frustrating. From a driver's standpoint, I can only imagine how frustrating that is when your times are non-confirmed. So you don't know if you have to put in a banker lap or if you need, when you try to like exhaust every ounce out of the car and try to maximize the optimal driving line. You don't know if you're staying in or not at that point.
And like building off some of those comments, like Andrew, we can talk about this maybe later in the episode, but a number of these drivers on the grid are kind of, they're in the hot seat in some of their seats. So, they are trying to push it to the limit just to try to get out of Q1 in qualifying or Q2 or get into the points at least. But I would be frustrated as a driver too. It's, trying to push it and it's like, oh, your lap is deleted. Your lap is deleted. The next thing you know, I'm P20. It's like, okay, well, figure it out. Like, come on.
Part of what I think frustrates me too is even thinking about some of these late applied penalties that we were seeing afterward. I understand that there's a review process, but think back to a couple of races ago where there was a racing incident. Alonso was being investigated. They applied the penalty after the race, but then he was reinstated on the podium because it had been past a certain number of laps. Like they have a certain amount of time in order to make the call on the penalty. And if they don't, then it's kind of like null and void at that point. Shouldn't the same thing kind of happen with track limit violations? Like you have a certain number of laps within the race to catch that and understand it, because at this point it's just like super nitty gritty. And if it really comes down to that level of replay and review, I mean, it is a judgment call at a certain point, similar to how a racing incident penalty would be a judgment call in many cases. And it just seems like having so many of these, like poor Ocon getting a 30-second penalty by the time they stacked everything up after the race. Like you're saying, just with qualifying, getting your lap times deleted is one thing, but I feel like it's just piling onto that when the same thing is happening after the race.
Well, it comes down to a matter of consistency. That's the issue, because when you're giving these penalties out during the race, I think this is like an extenuating circumstances when they had 1,200 laps to have to review. To me, that's the number. That's the issue. 1,200 laps had to be reviewed. So there was no way in shape and form that that the stewards, I think there's maybe, I don't know how many of them are going to be able to go through each 12, like go through each one during the racing time itself, especially when they keep piling on the errors. So I think they had to do it just for consistency purposes at that point, because when they had the 8 penalties that were provided during the race, 6 of them were for track limits. So I feel like you had to keep a consistent approach to it, hence the protests.
The crappy
Aston
thing
Martin are 2 for 2 on the season, baby. Let's go.
When in doubt, if you have a crappy weekend in the car, protest it. A lot of podcasts and a lot of people are just going to talk about this weekend about track limits, but we saw some great racing from like Hulkenberg, other than his DNF. We saw the Ferraris show very competitive. We saw some really fun fighting between both the Red Bulls, and heck, even Lando Norris, Mr.
My guy, I'm wearing the shirt. I felt proud enough to wear it in public again today.
Mr. Lando Norris got all the upgrades. Sorry, Oscar, but like able to get his car into P5, and then psych, he got into P4. There's like a lot to talk about this weekend, and I feel like we lost it in this whole track limits debate. But I guess let's talk about the sprint race. I think one of the biggest things I saw this weekend is a number of team drivers fighting each other over the radio, whether it was Max or Checo, Leclerc and Sainz, or Fernando and Lance to a little bit. But then like Lewis, I don't know if Lewis was fighting George, but there was maybe a lot of frustration with these track limits just led to like the banter on the radio. I think there's one race this weekend, the radio, if you had the radio access, this would have been the weekend for it.
Oh yeah, hands down. There was some quality commentary going over the airwaves this time around. Oh, so fun to listen to. I still kind of wish we could hear, especially like on a weekend like this, all the team principals talking to the race director. I feel like this would have been a good one to have that little snippet back in our lives for sure.
I think what made sprint so exciting was that it started with wet weather, everyone on the inter tires, and then I believe, at the beginning of the race with Red Bull was interesting, especially when Checo, he had to make up for his poor performance in qualifying the day before.
Yeah.
Kind of pushed Max over the edge in turn 1, which then Max kind of gave him right back in turn 2, and created some good quality content for DTS and the radio discussions there. I don't blame Checo. He got pushed all the way into the wall to begin the race, so he definitely was going to come back and push Max out on the outside. That's kind of a little payback. But that kind of was able to get Nico to take advantage of that and move into P2 for the majority of the sprint race, which was great to see a Haas get up that quick or get up that far that quick.
And it's been impressive. Like he's been able to prove a lot of people wrong this season, just the way that he's been driving this car. And it was really interesting to see halfway through the sprint race, a number of drivers went to go put on slicks. And man, the amount of time that you got shaved off when you were on the slicks compared to I think it was the top 6 drivers that were stayed on the inters because they missed the opportunity. I think George was like saving 4 seconds per lap. And even if he got on slicks earlier, if the track dried earlier, there could have been an even more intense fight within the top 4 alone.
I think also too the fact that made it an interesting race too was the drawing of the track towards the end of the sprint, which kind of then made you either question, do you take a gamble going on the slick tires or do you stay on those inters? And we saw a lot of people in the top 8 at the time stayed on the inters. Well, I think it was only Nico and I think Russell who were fighting for points in the top 8. They took the slicks. But based on everyone's strategy and the back runners taking slicks, they ended up fighting each other for a couple laps, which then took them out of winning in some quality points, I thought, in my opinion, at that point, because then it kind of gave those who had inters a little buffer time to keep in to hold that position.
I think especially, I don't know if you both notice it on the TV coverage, but as the track was drying up, the pit lane was not dry at all. So these these drivers were put on slicks, and I don't know if it was Russell, but you literally saw him go like, literally had
Fishtail?
Yeah, thank you. That's the term. Fishtail out of the pit lane, and I was like, oh boy, that could have been dicey if that happened. But yeah, Max and Sergio got like 1-2, and Carlos Sainz. I don't know about you guys saw the awards for these sprint races are kind of like, it feels like a high school award. It's just like a small little plaque. Kind of feels like, it's like grade top 5 of my spelling bee. I just looked at it, didn't really look exciting compared to the actual trophies on the Sunday, to be quite honest. I think last year, or was it a couple of years ago, they at least got like a medal, and it looks like only this year, if you win the race, you get the gold medal or whatever.
Interesting.
I would rather they just give out medals for the sprint format as opposed to like trophies, because again, it's not really a race, it's just a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's just for additional points as an opportunity.
I still just despise that it doesn't really have any skin in the game for the overall like race weekend. I don't know. Like you said, it's just extra points in there, but I'm not on board with this sprint format yet. Time will tell, but I'm still not digging it. So screw the medals, just give them a participation ribbon.
I guess let's get right into the race. On Sunday, we saw a number of good drives by a number of drivers. I think the talk was Max Verstappen pitting the final lap with, I think it was a 24-second lead, I believe, just so he can get fastest lap and going against his team. And I don't know if any of you were watching. The Red Bull engineers were quite confused, and then when Max said he's coming in, they all had to rush to get tires. I was like, that's pretty ballsy, man, just for that extra point. But, I guess he just wants to wrap this up as quick as possible. I think one thing I'm looking forward to in Silverstone is we're seeing a pretty competitive fight for P2 in the constructors between Aston Martin, now Ferrari, and obviously Mercedes. And, I don't know if they're all within 30 or 40 points, but I think that's going to be the talk going into Silverstone. And I think Mercedes is going to get some upgrades as well. But, good recovery drive for Leclerc this weekend. Carlos got screwed over by the track limits. But, I think, Ferrari to get back on the podium, I think is just a little motivation for only their second podium of the season so far.
And I have to give a shout out to McLaren. Like, those upgrades were looking fine. I don't know if you saw at one point, but there was a clip where Norris was coming down a straight trying to overtake Hamilton, and the straight line speed compared to the Mercedes was pretty competitive at that point in time. So it makes me excited because that's where we have struggled to find pace in any way, shape, or form for the last while. I know Lando was saying that obviously in some of the slow sections going around some bends, there was a little to be desired from the car. But yeah, we're seeing a lot more movement. I'm hoping that it continues to shake out and that these teams, as they bring even more upgrades, things continue to stay competitive, and those that were at the start of the pack early in the season don't, kind of keep pushing forward too far. Because even Max said it, he'd really like it. Like, it was his only complaint about the race is that he wished the Ferrari was faster to keep up with him and make things interesting, right? So would have been, I think, really great to see. And hopefully, who knows, we got the summer break coming up soon. There'll be some crazy stuff when we come back.
There was one point in the race where it's the point where Max overtook Checo again Charles to go back into P1. I think it was going up the hill towards turn 2. The Red Bull was so fast enough in the corner that he waited behind Leclerc to get to the DRS point, like the line, so that he could get DRS off the straight, and was still able then to pass him in the turn to then get the DRS shoot out. Like, it was a zero AI move looking like on the F1 2023 game when he did it. Because he was behind him at the start, and then as soon as the corner came in, and then just bolted ahead. So yeah, a little more pace would have been a lot more fun to watch. It was just exciting to see Max not lead a lap for once.
It's a whole 17 laps that a Red Bull hasn't led so far this season. I think that's where we're at right now.
Hey, we broke his streak. Ferrari broke his streak. I mean, he will beat other streaks of ours, but it's baby steps, I guess, this season for us.
Because this is the problem we have in sports now, right? When people are doing such tremendous things, we kind of take it for granted. We don't really appreciate like the absolute, how legendary it is, right? Going 9 for 9, and how how Red Bull could in theory win every race this year and do a clean sweep, right? Never to happen.
It'd be kind of cool.
It would be cool, right? In that case. But speaking to the Max fans, watch every race with intent, because we may never see anything like this again with how good this guy is. Like, I know, Lewis was great in Mercedes, but it might be Max currently in form might make a case for probably the greatest stretch of the season of all time right now.
Just to add on that point is he won the sprint classification by 21 seconds. He won the race by five seconds, but that was because he took a pit stop just to get the fastest lap. So he was in theory probably at least 30 seconds ahead of Leclerc. Also, just a couple other moments to say, you got to give a shout out to our Canadian driver. He got in the points this year, this weekend race, Lance Stroll of Aston Martin. Actually, you know what? Well, I shouldn't be saying this. Andrew, that's your team. You should be saying this portion.
It's a little misleading. So yes, Lance Stroll has become Canada's highest scoring F1 driver of all time with 238 career points. But I think a massive asterisk should be placed beside this. Because if we were to take a look at previous scoring systems, other famous Canadian F1 drivers such as Jacques Villeneuve was participating in, compared to the scoring system that they have now, F1, it's like comparing apples to oranges, unfortunately. I did the math before the podcast. And if we had the current scoring system back in the days of Jacques Villeneuve when he was racing, he would have had an 846 career F1 points.
Lance?
No, Jacques Villeneuve would have had
sorry. I totally missed. I was like, how did we do the math on that?
So Jacques, if we had the current scoring system back in the day, Jacques Villeneuve would have had 846 points.
Wow.
So everyone take that with a grain of salt. Like, congratulations to Lance Stroll. Massive accomplishment, put it that way. And he's only growing, and he's continuing his career. But let's just take that maybe with a bit of an asterisk, unfortunately.
Verstappen has 2,240.5 points.
What?
Well, again, this is this new classification system, right?
Yeah.
No, I know, but just here we are celebrating 200 and something points for Lance. And this guy's got a 10x multiplier on it. Oh man, I'll take the wins where I can get them, I guess.
Well, speaking about a win, driver, we did forget. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but driver of the day, Lando Norris.
Driver of the day, very exciting. It was really great to see. Like I said before, happy to see the momentum McLaren's making, and I finally feel comfortable wearing a McLaren shirt out in public again. But we also got a really cute little bit of radio from Lando when he found out. This was just when he was kind of doing the cool down laps around the track, celebrating P5, thanking everyone back at the facility for all the upgrades and the hard work that they put into the car. But then finding out that he was driver of the day was a very touching moment as well. And he was very excited to have won that. So it just goes to show, even though I think we all think that he would expect to see himself in a different place at this stage in his career, given where McLaren was pacing a few years ago, but it still means a lot. It's all about those little moments, right? There's a reason why people just kind of enjoy the racing and they enjoy those other things that happen as well. Like Alonso's just jazzed to be driving a car that he really likes again, things of that sort. So
I felt so bad for Will Joseph over the radio though at one point during the race, because he had to warn Lando about track limits, right? Because he was badgering about how Lewis was when he was behind Lewis. He's like, yeah, he's off again. And there was radio goes like, I know you're gonna hate me, but you need to keep it in the track and turn. I was like, oh, poor Will, oh, poor Will.
But the best is then the commentators coming back after being like, why are they so apologetic? It's the race engineer's job to keep the driver in line during the race.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because Alex Albon, he got I believe he got track limits too, but his race engineer did not give him the heads up that he was getting warnings and stuff. So when he finally got the 5-second penalty, he kind of lost it in the radio. He's like, what do you mean you're not telling me this?
My goodness. So yeah, I mean, just goes to show you there's at least a pretty healthy team dynamic at McLaren if everyone's like, listen, let's approach this situation with a smidge of humility. Super, super excited to see that. And then also Lando's posts were very fun when he was celebrating P5 and then P4 after.
I also forgot to mention there was a record set this weekend too.
Was it Max Verstappen again?
Nope. It was Esteban Ocon. He had set the record for most penalties in a single F1 race with 5. He had 5 seconds for unsafe relief in the pits to start, and then he was given 4 penalties post-race for track infringements. And how they applied the penalties for track infringements after the race was, if you had 4 track infringements, you get a 5-second penalty. If you had 5, then you get a 10-second penalty, which then would reset, so that if you got another 4, you get a 5-second penalty, and another 5, you get 10. Well, this guy got a 5, a 10, a 5, and a 10. So he had at least 10 track limits that were calculated post after the race. Poor guy got slapped with a 30-second penalty, and he went far down the list.
And he got hit with so many penalties, and he was still P14.
I'm impressed.
Still not as bad as the 6 drivers below him.
But
For-
still, that's just heartbreaking because he was in the points beforehand, wasn't he?
Believe so.
yeah.
No, he
so
wasn't.
when-
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
He wasn't.
But
Okay, I was gonna say because that would suck if it was like a double point scoring for Alpine, and then
is it safe to say though that this was the weekend where the straw broke the proverbial camel's back with Nick DeVries?
Wait, before we get into that, I was listening to the Dirty Side of the Track podcast earlier, and they said even Nico Hulkenberg, when he DNF'd, he got a track limits violation.
kidding me?
When he got DNF'd, when he DNF'd us.
Yeah, he turned out and he's like, "Oh, track limits." I'm like, "Come on, man, this guy's already had enough."
His car was literally smoking out, and they're waving black and white flags on him.
oh my gosh, I can't believe that. That's absurd. The other thing that was really funny talking about records was that they had a graphic that they'd never had to use before, which was drivers who have not received penalties for violating track limits, and there were only 4 drivers' names on it.
Oh,
Those the commenters like, we've never had to make a graphic like this before, but here goes.
God.
Also, just another actually milestone. That was Ferrari's 800th podium in history as a team, with Leclerc finishing P2. So that's another fun stat for this. But I guess back to the question, I think, Andrew, yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, not looking good for Nick.
No, he got a 5-second penalty in the race for pretty much forcing Kevin Magnussen into the shadow realm. I believe it was like at turn 5, 6, 7 around there. And then post-race, he got 2 penalties for track infringements. Poor Sonoda, though, had a 5-second penalty during the race for track infringements, and then got it reset to a 10-second penalty. He had like 8 warnings during the race.
Oh my gosh.
I want to sit in that drivers meeting in Silverstone next weekend, and I wonder if track limits is going to be like the most common buzzword said in the meeting.
And they need to bring back that office style reviews that they used to do back in like 2017 on YouTube. They had highlights of these of like those like meetings.
Yeah.
And I wish that, if they could bring them back for this, it would be insane.
Before we get into Silverstone, so apparently there was some guy on like a jetpack that was trying to fly around the track, and he
Oh my
just like
gosh.
ate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was part of the pre-race entertainment, kind of like something that they were doing ahead of time. And you can actually see it. He was trying to land, but his left hand, the pack that was there, it looks like it wasn't responding to the motions or the cues he was given it. And just the cut to Oscar Piastri after this guy eats it and gets up and is like, "I'm okay," is the most Jim Halpert thing I've ever seen.
I was gonna say, was that they couldn't call up Robert Downey Jr. to do that role, or even Iron Man to come in. It was probably Robert Downey Jr.'s stunt devil, whoever that person was.
Speaking of Norris and Piastri, some incredible pictures came out today of the Silverstone livery that McLaren will be donning this year.
Oh, baby.
If you want to talk about sex in a picture, that's it.
I gotta say, I do love it, but I was hoping that if it was going to be Google Chrome related, I get that they're going for like the literal definition of Chrome, but I was hoping it would be something cool, kind of like the wheel covers that they have, and they would take crazy colors all over it personally. But I do kind of like that it's giving throwback McLaren vibes with the orange and the silver on it. But yeah, one of our friends messaged me, Garrett, and he was like, "So is the car made out of chrome?" I was like, "No, that would throw off the aerodynamics. It's just the paint color. It's just for the vibes, nothing more." But something, if ever someone wanted to do a custom car just for show purposes, you know what to do, McLaren.
But Erica, like, is this like the Google update that we all want? Because if I'm gonna update it, it literally looks like the Force India 2015 car.
A little, yeah. I think that one had a little bit more black on it. This is a little bit lighter, and it makes me think more of like the white and orange McLarens of yore. I don't know. You say Force India, I start thinking pink Mercedes, and I'm trying to be hopeful that maybe there's some speedy changes coming with the change in design as well.
What I just like about the chrome is that it's a beautiful nod. It's a beautiful balance of like the nod to the past, but also with the current, with the current format in terms of the color scheme. I think it's something that they could, it's funny. We always took these one-off liveries. We're like, man, we wish we had these full time in
Yeah.
the future. And this is definitely one that I'd be like, I wish they had this going forward. It is so good.
I would on fantasy, I would like that's my sleeper pick going into Silverstone is if Lando Norris can do what he did this weekend. I think the track's limit, and also like he will have. Well, I was going to say track's the limit.
Sky's the limit.
Thank you. Yeah, try to avoid doing an episode without saying track limits. I'll try that. But no, I think if we go into Silverstone, I think he's the sleeper pick in fantasy. If you guys can pick him up, especially how great he looked this weekend, and now having the home crowd on his support. I think he could potentially put himself back into P4 again, or even compete in a P3 position.
Well,
That
I
would
think
make me
Erica
so
can.
excited.
She's had like 2 people on her roster for like the past 5 races, so I'm sure she has space.
Okay, you know what? Grid Rival will not load on my phone. It's not my fault.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay, first place, settle down over there, Andrew. You know what? Mr. Ricci just coming in on P3 on the podiums. I'm creeping.
I just gotta say, do you both have iPhones?
Yep.
Yeah, see, I'm team Android, baby. And so this app does not work on Android.
Well, that is team your
You
problem.
lose.
That is team. People need to develop things better, develop their cars better, develop apps better for multiple different environments. I'm just saying.
Yeah, if you're gonna
F1
update,
distinct
your car, you might as well update your phone at the same time. Just say it.
I will say I am staunchly against iPhones and I've always hated them. So I can't, it's my own fault. I can't figure out how to use them.
Any last thoughts heading into Silverstone this weekend? I guess, Andrew, I'm going to put Aston Martin on the spot. I mean, it was not the easiest of weekends for them. What do you like? Obviously, what do you think they're gonna need to do in terms of strategy, especially like a tough track like Silverstone?
This weekend they got unlucky, I would say, at one point with the VSC, and they kind of caught themselves out going to the pits too late. I think otherwise they would have been competitive, but I think they need to be better at managing strategies and really taking advantage of any safety car or virtual safety car that comes about this weekend. Take advantage of that going forward. And great to see Lance make a little bit of a comeback this week for sure. I know I've given him a lot of flack recently about his poor performances, but he finished ahead of Alonso in both in the sprint classification this weekend, which was great, and he was able to get up to the points finish regardless of penalties or not penalties this weekend as well. So I don't know. I think the issue is we're starting to see Mercedes and Ferrari bring their upgrades that are clearly above and beyond. I step ahead, we'll say, of Aston Martin's upgrades. We're kind of in that P4 area that we should be right now. So in that sense, I'm not surprised by it, but it would be great to see. I know that it'd be great to see if Daddy Stroll, now I'm going to say Don Stroll, for his fine workings behind the scenes this weekend, I would say, providing that protest, because knowing he had a hand in it, most likely. They need to find a way to continue that upgrading on the car and seeing where they can bring a package that will allow them to be competitive now with Mercedes and Ferrari.
It's something that not a lot of people will notice this weekend. Daniel Ricciardo will test drive the Red Bull in the British Grand Prix.
I'm so excited.
So there's been a lot of talk that if he's maybe going to be coming back, so I guess there might be a little, it's going to be practice, but there'll be a lot of pressure on him to at least put that car in a good spot in FP1 or FP2, whichever one he will practice in.
If he comes back, do you think he will hit Lando in the face with a bouncy ball again? Because that was a year ago at Silverstone.
Yes.
Not only will DR come back there, I think F1's testing a new a wet wheel cover, this weekend as well, from what I gather. So in order to reduce spray and enhance visibility during wet races, the FIA want to try these new back wheel covers that will reduce the angle of the spray to just like the car length as opposed to the driver's height. And so they can be able to enhance visibility during these wet weather races. Interesting, in my opinion.
Well, according to the Weather Network, it looks like it's going to rain on Saturday and Sunday. So time will tell if it's going to work.
If it's raining in jolly old England, it just makes absolute sense, in my opinion. Put these drivers to the test. And, that's what they're used to driving in. Therefore, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect, in my opinion. We're going to see some great racing. We're going to see some wheel-to-wheel action. And we're going to see perhaps a mix of inters and slicks to make it a very interesting race. And I'm so hopeful that it'll be a very great British Grand Prix in 2023.
And on that note, let's turn into this weekend for the British Grand Prix. I am your co-host, Ricci, my amazing co-hosts here, Erica and Andrew. Thank you for tuning in to season 3, episode 18. Technically, I think episode 61 in total of the F1 podcast. Again, we are at 452 followers on Instagram. Let's hit 500 by the end of July, and let us know where you're going to be watching the race this weekend. Shoot us a message, and let's get some more fan questions back into the let's get some fan questions back into
back into the podcast.
Thank you. Let's get some fan questions back into the podcast. And again, that's it for this week's episode, and tune into next week where we'll cover the British Grand Prix. Thanks all, and have a great day.